You know, as we find ourselves losing some of our elders, we look around and find out, oh, our generation is next in line to be the elders. And Angelo was always, for years, has acted like one of our elders, always there to help us, always there to share with us, tell us what we need to know, sometimes telling us what we need to know even if we didn't ask. And we appreciate that because that's a true elder. Angelo spent his life living the way of the people, but also doing what our elders taught us and have told us. Go out and learn. So he's not just a fisherman. He's been a sheet metal worker. He's been a father. He's had lots of experiences. But those are just what I know. That's why I'm here to listen today, try to hear what it's like to have lived Angelo's life and the family's life in their own words. So Angelo Jefferson is my eldest cousin. He's the eldest in a whole generation of dozens of cousins. And to hear what it was like for his children, Angel and Dina, Starla, Sunshine, what it was like to grow up in the family and to be fishers, living off the water, and living the life that we all have been privileged to be born in, to be born Lummi, and to be here and have this opportunity. So I'd like to have Angelo come up, share some words with us. Haishka Siyam.
Yeah. Thank you all for being here. You know, my name is Angelo Jefferson. My Indian name is Wanlalak. I'm the oldest of 13, and we're us older ones were born and raised down the river, which was a fishing village and third world. There's no running water, no plumbing, and rat infestation, and it started out really bad. So my parents were fishermen. My dad served 2 terms in the Merchant Marines to make enough money to buy a seiner. He come home and found my mom and married. And they made sure I had good grades to go to college so I wouldn't be a fisherman. So guess what? But it turned out good, you know. It turned out great. So I worked sheet metal because I'd worked every job you could find just to provide for my family. And when I got into fishing, I brought my family along. And the big thing is I bought my wife Kathy a boat, and she fished alongside me in Ventura and San Francisco and up here. And we did really well. And her goal was to beat me, and once she got more fishing than I did, she wanted to quit. But all the girls here fished. Some of them got their car from for high school. The oldest daughter, Dina, is not here. She fished one of my boats, and she did a lot of things like me right now. And she drives a semi truck. So you're on the road and you hear somebody honk at you, they could be either pissed at you or recognize you, because she's my daughter. So don't get in the way. But anyway, I'll have my daughters introduce themselves, and I guess I need to tell you, there's been so much change in my lifetime, and maybe every generation sees this kind of change, but growing up in the river, I seen a stern wheeler go up the river to Ferndale to deliver supplies. And now sometimes it's hard to get a canoe up there. And I've seen that river freeze over solid, so we could walk across it. And you don't see that kind of stuff anymore. And between global warming and habitat destruction, and overfishing, our way of life is almost gone. And I've been fortunate to live my shellangin, fishing, hunting, and I tell the kids golfing, so. And I've talked to the high school kids, and I've told them You know, education is important, college degree is important, but if it's not in the cards, you know, it's hard work. And I have two friends with high school education that are fishermen, and they're multimillionaires. And it's all about hard work. And you put that together with an education, you know, it's a winning formula. And I'm glad to see the kids here with their presentation. And I wish you all the luck in the future. And right now I have my daughters introduce themselves with their Indian name.
Good afternoon. Isitanat Sanisnat, Sunshine Fitzgibbon. Welcome and thank you all for being here. Welcome the students as well. I was surprised to see my nephew Peyton and happy to see him here, and my cousin Daniela, and presenting. It's all about getting to know where you're coming from with the presentations, and I appreciated hearing that. So thank you to the students for being here with us. Thank you to our friends and our family that are here with us. And I look forward to listening to my family speak as well. Hi, Shka.
Hi, my name is Angel Jefferson. My Indian name is Lashasi. Thank you for coming. And she said most of it.
Hello, my name is Starla Jefferson. Traditional name is Kwasnat, and I'm an employee here, just a little over a year and a half in my role as the CEU coordinator. I too got to listen to my son Peyton present. It was really nice to hear what they had to say, the students, and what they've done here is just really, really great and humbling to hear the different generations speak. And I'm also related to Daniela. I didn't get to hear her presentation, but I look forward to hearing more. And thank you for coming, and thank you for allowing us this opportunity to be here with you all. Haishka.
Well, yes, one thing, way back when, a lot of the Indians had seiners and fished, and the state kept us in Bellingham Bay and kind of kept us down. And I remember, well, my dad had a seiner called the Mary Bell, and Uncle Vic Jones had 3 seiners. I think one was Uncle Sam, and one was Harry J.R., and I don't remember all of them. But a lot of Indians had seiners, and the white buyers in town thought the Indian fleet was getting too big, so they quit buying the Indian fish. You could only sell fish upriver, so I think that's one reason we lost a lot of our seiners back then. But we kept on, you know, we kept on plugging away, and we built our fleet back up. At one point, we had 28 seiners and 200 gill netters, and now we're going back downhill. And at one time, I fished 10 months out of the year here, plus California. And then last year, this year, I fished 2 days. So that's just the way it's gone. It's almost gone. And I don't see it coming back in our lifetime, you know, because there's no water, global warming. And I see some of the kids' presentation about depression and trauma, and that's part of it. Once some of my friends couldn't fish, you know, they got depressed, and I think they made it through, but your heart is always on the water, and hopefully this next generation will find a way to, you know, just get out there anyway to do subsistence, you know. But I don't know what the answer is. There's a lot of problems in the ocean. There's domic acid on the coast, areas of depleted oxygen. And a couple of years ago, all the starfish died almost all over the Pacific from a virus. So, and then the blob, you know, and there's so much change. And I try to tell my grandkids about how we live down the river and having to walk to school on the island and at night, and all the disease that we've seen down the river. God, it's just unimaginable, some of it. But most of us survived it, and we're still here, and hopefully they recognize how to turn it around, and I think they are. You know, they're stop logging on the edges of the streams, but and if you look at the river, on low water, that's grown like a mile or more, the sandbar, and that's just because of poor logging practices. And I don't see no answer to it, but hopefully some of these college students would get into forestry and things like that, just to help get better logging practices. So I guess I can ask you guys if you have any questions. There you go.
Would you all think about the recent invasion of European green crab in Bellingham Bay?
European Greek, the crab invasion in Bellingham Bay.
Oh, the green crab?
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't seen it. I heard about it, and I know it's an invasive species. I think maybe if the state and the tribes get together and build smaller pots and maybe target it and try and get rid of them, because it is a real threat. I haven't studied it that much, but I've heard that it's a real threat to Dungeness crab. And right now, that's our only mainstay is crab. Halibut was good for a while, but we've overfished that. So, and the way things work is warm water like El Nino is good for shellfish, and it's bad for finfish. So that's one of the reasons why nobody knows what happens out in the ocean, and between the blob and El Nino. You know, I don't know who studies it, but that's the problem. Why there's no fish, along with habitat destruction in the river. And I think as far as invasive species, they've been around a while, but I think they just started looking for them specifically.
Do you have any stories that have been passed down to you about how this area has changed over the years that you can share with us?
As far as fishing, it goes and flows like the tide. Back during the wars, they fished halibut, or they fished herring for the oil, and then I guess they disappeared for a while. And then in late 60s, early 70s, a Chinese man come around and asked two lummies to try to fish herring, and that was my father-in-law Jack Letters and his uncle, and he's Don Lewis, and they set out the first herring net on the west coast for roe herring. and it was a big net, and they didn't get to the lead line, they lost it. So back then there was a lot of herring, and it was the basis of the food chain. So that started all the herring fisheries on, we went in California in '74 and fished herring, and turned into an awesome fisheries, and then it moved all the way up into Alaska. Now the Japanese quit eating sushi, and they're eating more McDonald's, so the price of herring is basically like bait, $50 a ton. Where at one time we got $1,000 to $2,000 a ton, and it was all started out here by Indians. And halibut. My grandma has a story that her and her sister Bertha paddled out. They lived on Lane Spit, and they paddled out to Sousa Reef to jig for cod and halibut. And they were in a canoe, and my grandma said, "Sister Bertha," said, "I think we're snagged, sister." She's both pulling on it real hard, and they looked down, and I can see bottom, and she said, "I can see bottom over here." "Oh my gosh, it's a halibut, bigger than the boat," and he didn't have a knife to cut it loose. So. But we could, as a family, when we lived up at Portage, we used to go over Lummi Island, it's called Deepwater Bay, and jig for cod. We get red snapper, lingcod, and once in a while halibut, and that was just 10 minutes away, just across from where we lived. And now you can't even go out, you know, and find a bottom fish out here. And halibut, I'm pretty sure we overfished it, you know. As far as salmon, my grandma, they traveled around in different places and with their family, and one of the places they went was what's the river? Squalicum. They camped here in summer for coho and chinook, and as a little girl she used to go into the woods and play on the snowdrifts in the middle of summer, you know, in the old growth forest. And she said when they could hear the coho coming over the bar, it sounded like a big wind. And they traveled up to Birch Bay for clams, horse clams, as a young girl. And she was sold to my grandpa for 2 horses, and she told me she cried all the way up. Her parents brought her up the river in a canoe up from Lane Spit up to Red River, and she cried all the way up there. So, and that's how it was done back then.
Juanita?
Oh yeah.
Thank you so much for being able to come forward as a family and share your beautiful experience. Really appreciate it. And my question, I have a whole list of questions. But, the one I'd like to start with is what your feelings or what your understanding or what's your opinion of how the Judge Bolt decision has affected the Northwest Indian fishery. And I'd also like to invite your daughters to speak their side of it too. I'm sure they've been affected by it. But I'd like to start with you about your feelings about the Judge Bolt decision.
The Bolt decision was just, it was a great, you know, when it first come out, we had tribal members come from, our tribe grew because it brought people back. And it was tough at first because they didn't want us to catch 50% of the fish. We'd parked in the harbor and walk up the dock, and there'd be guys standing there wanting to fight. And they all sang it. We all seen that, the seiners. And you had to stand up to them, or get out of the harbor, and that's just the way it was. But it was amazing at first. We fished 5 days a week, and we couldn't catch the quota. I think it got us to a point where we got good enough boats to compete, and now, you know, like anything else, everything's gone, and we're fighting other tribes for what's left, you know. But it was really good timing for, as I tell people, that we lived and grew up in a perfect time, in a perfect world, and I think everybody can say that, you know, if they appreciate life.
So for me, the bolt decision, was just our way of life. It allowed us to continue the way of life. I know that a lot of people say that there was a lot lost with the bolt decision because we gave up 50%, and it's, you know, that's before my time and my knowledge, but for me it allowed us to live on the water with our parents. Most of the time I say that we lived our parents' life. We didn't do a whole lot of sports because we were on the boat or at the docks. I have one picture of me in my Easter dress on the boat because we had to stop by and, I don't know, pick up a part or something. So I had a white Easter dress on the boat. But we lived their life, and that was amazing. I wouldn't change it otherwise. I don't regret not doing sports. I loved being on the water. Till this day, I feel more at home on the water. When things feel like they're going wrong in my life, the water seems to make it better. Even living by the water helps. So the bolt decision just allowed us to have the ability to be with my parents, travel with them to California, to Alaska, and I guess that's just my experience.
My experience is, you know, of course the same. You know, traveling from, you know, here, Washington State, and then going down to San Francisco, and then coming back home to Washington, and then going up to Alaska to go fishing, have them go fishing in the summertime. You know, and a lot of these pictures, you know, I agree with Sunshine that a lot of these pictures we were always with our parents on the water. You know, and I have this one picture here that you could see where we were, I think we were king fishing, and we were in this little boat that our dad was pulling us along, and that was our fun during the summertime. We would, you know, be towed on this little boat, and then swimming, we would, you know, he would throw life jackets on us and tie us up, and we'd get to jump off the boat and swim. Because because we were on the boat for weeks back then, you know, and you know, we traveled all over, and it was great.
How do I follow up to that? I think it allowed me to learn from my grandparents. We were able to be around our grandpas and grandmas for long periods of time, and to have that ability is, you can't say that too many times nowadays, right? It was nice to learn from just how they compose themselves every day, and to hear some of their stories. And yeah, like Sunshine was saying, there was sometimes days at a time that we didn't see land. So I was the one that would, I didn't share this a lot, but I would get seasick a lot. So I remember Grandpa would always say, look at the land, and you won't feel so sick. Because it would just be to the point where I wouldn't know what to do with myself. But learning those little small tricks from Grandpa and Grandma really helped me preserve, you know, my health, and allowed me to learn from my sisters, and just watching my parents uphold themselves the way they did, and like, you know, sustenance too, you know, having that just, wow, it seems like right now it's hard to, you know, even me, I don't know how many times I get to eat fish per week now. It's, you know, it's hard for me being an, you know, a full-time employee, full-time mother. I don't really get to go out into the ocean as much as I would like, but it's always a goal, right? You know, so, just reiterating and recapturing what my family is saying, that you know, family is life, water is life, and you know, we miss some of these ones.
It's unusual for both parents to have their own fishing budget. How did you divide up, or did you?
How did we divide up on who went with who, or how'd you
Oh,
get stuck with me?
They all wanted to go with her. They yell too much.
Yes.
But, Kathy, I took Kathy to California. She was my deckhand, and back then the Italians thought it was taboo to have a woman on the boat. And by the time about the third or fourth year, they could understand that we didn't have to pay a deckhand. All our money went home, and most of them guys from Bellingham that used to be your enemy gained a lot of respect for us because there's no boating season in California, and it allowed me to compete on an even level with them because we started it, and it was good and bad. You know, El Nino, we just we fished real hard just to break even to come home. Compared to some years when the price was so good that we made. One year made 100,000 in 14 hours, and one year made 200,000 in 2 weeks. And then there was times when early on, well, you just barely had enough money to get home. And one year when we went to Alaska, we caught 40 ton in one day, and we spent 10 days below down on the beach with no food and water. So I think I come out of there 150 pounds. And bear tracks all over. One of our guys was going up in a hill getting seagull eggs, and the only thing flying off was shags. I won't say his name. But there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of hardship, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. You know, how many can say that they live in their shellangin', you know?
I just had a quick question. First, Angela, thank you for being here. Really had a question for Sunshine Angel and Starla. If there's some life lessons that you learned from your dad and your mom as well, that you being raised on the boat, on the water, but what are some life lessons that you from your parents that you pass on to your children?
I think the first one is there's a lot of stuff in life that you don't want to do, but you're going to have to do it. And I tell my kids that. And I remember fishing when I was younger, and I used to get seasick. And we would be, you know, fishing for days, and I would go in and go to sleep, and my dad would be picking fish off, and then he would wake me up, and I'd have to go outside and help pick fish off, and then I would be leaning over the boat getting sick, and I'm like, you know, really blue in the face, but I'm still having to pick fish off all night. So, you know, it was something that I didn't want to do because I was feeling sick, but I had to do it. So that's what, you know, drives me now, and I tell my kids that too. It's like, you don't want to do it, but you have to. So.
Tell them what kind of car you got out of it.
Oh, well, yes. So I bought my first car at 15, and I bought a little Honda Prelude. So that was me.
So for me, it was really just hard work. They Well, it's hard work and in living a life you want to live. So my dad won't say it, but he still wakes up at 5:30 every single morning, regardless of whether he's going to fish or crab that day, whether it's a weekend or not. And growing up, I seen my parents both work every single day because I didn't see them as entrepreneurs because they were living the life that they wanted to live. They were living their shillingin'. And so it was natural for them to wake up and do something for their business every single day. Every day, they'd get parts, they would prepare the boat, they'd get groceries, they would do fish tickets. Every day they did something towards their business. And so for me, it was just work ethic for them, and then living to do something that you love. And it didn't seem like work. It seemed like a way of life, like you said, living a shillingin'.
Oh, he went has a question.
One of the teachings that I remember was fishing is you gotta prepare everything the night before, otherwise the salmon will be gone. What is one teaching that you guys hold on to that, because sustenance lifestyle is about preserving the resource. What is the teaching that you guys have that help you guys preserve this resource?
My first experience was my grandma was she had a skiff that she fished on the river, and she brought me along when I was very young, and we caught a big king salmon right in front of our house, 25-pounder worth about $5. And she says, I usually throw the first one back for my grandkids, but since you're here and we need the gas, we're gonna take it home. But that was a practice to throw the first one back, and I don't know if it survived. But fishing is probably 60% preparation. And back then, when the outboards first come out, I call it shear pin generation, because if you hit your outboard, if you hit a log or a stick and you broke the shear pin, you roll back up. So having enough, the right kind of gear, hydraulic hoses, belts, and everything, and spark plugs and everything to make sure you're not stuck out there and losing your net. When I was growing up, there was no outboards. They paddled up, they rowed up river, and they sailed up river. And my dad did that, you know, anyway, and all the way down to Fish Point and back, and a lot of the guys did that. And I know Tim's dad did that, and that's how everybody survived. And I remember the first, they had inboards too, that inboard, outboard. But I remember when the first 40 horse come out and went steaming up river, man, everybody wanted one after that, you know.
Do you think that, this is kind of like building off that question, do you think that the bolt decision kind of changed our mindsets of like how we preserve that resource?
I think we always, I think anybody that, first we were taught to respect the resource, but more than that, respect the people that do it. And we were taught, you know, to, that it is fragile, and to protect it. And part of that was, you know, fishing in the season. Yeah. And I think a lot of the things went unsaid, you know. Looking back, I don't know if there's anything I could have did better, you know, except the information that Lummy put out way back when, and his brother was the first one, talked about, his name was Bob Davis, he's my friend, he talked about how logging practice were affecting our river. And he gave an example, he says you pour water over a bald man's head, it's gonna run off. You pour water on a man with hair, you know, it's gonna come off slow. And that was his example. And the state and federals didn't listen to us. They thought, you know, we have a water problem, and they just laughed because this is the Pacific Northwest. There's lots of rain. They didn't understand, and our tribe has had such good biologists that we were way ahead of the state, to a point that they come to us for information. Alan Chapman, for one, and we had more information than they did, you know, because we seen it as a priority, but because they didn't listen or didn't want to listen, and the almighty dollar rules, you know, it's how we got here. Who's that? Oh, the elder first.
I grew up, Angie and I got to be friends back in junior high school. He married my first cousin, I married his first cousin. So all you guys out there figure what kind of cousinship we are right now. But, you know, to be a good fisherman, you gotta have, just like Angie says, you gotta make sure your gear's in proper shape. You gotta know how to repair out on the water. You gotta know the tides. You got to be careful, and when you're out there, you got to respect the water, which he did. One time I went out with Angie on the Jason R. Now, I'll remind you all this stuff that you got to know about the water. We came out of the harbor, and we got out there to where we either went south or we went north. Which way are we going to go? And this is my recollection, and I could be wrong. He's steering, and I'm up there just riding, taking everything in. And he says, which way are we going to go, bud? Doing that. So Angie, this is what I recall. Spits in his hand, goes up, and it went that way, went south. So we went south. And I said, what the heck is that? He says, one of the girls did that or something like that. And believe it or not, we did all right. We went south.
Can't miss you, it's fish everywhere.
Yeah. Some things that Angie's not saying here is that, you know, he's talking about his grandma Helen. Down there by Fish Point, there's a drift, Helen's Drift. They used to stay in a cabin down there. You know, fish right down there. Helen's Drift. I don't know if the younger ones know that because it's Helen's Drift and then another one above that and another one above that, above that. But the family, very good fishermen. Knew what they were doing. The family lived on Portage. He kind of mentioned that a little bit because there's his grandma Helen and his dad and mother and family that lived over there. And the stories that I heard, you know, they had a lot of fun. We went over there, I got to go over and see it one time, and I believe that your dad was building a new home in it. Building a new home. But because, and correct me, Angie, but because of the concern of the kids being able to get to school, you move back? I know they would come across on a boat every morning, but for whatever reason why they came home, I'm not sure. But Portage Island, I think you guys is one of the last ones that lived over there. You know, so. But I just had to share that, all the knowledge that you gotta have.
Portage Island is another story. Tribal leaders and
Oh, that's right.
the house is almost done, and they're worried about tribal members selling property. They didn't want the reservation to tribal members to sell Indian land, so our house was condemned, and we were put out in the street in the middle of winter by tribal leaders. But anyway, I don't want to talk about that. I brought him out fishing with fishing line one time. We went trolling on my skiff, and back when we was a bunch of drunken fools, we bought a case of beer. We was trolling around behind Lummi Island all day like that, and we said, "Oh, I guess there's nothing here." So he reels in his thing like that, and we was trolling around a codfish all day. I think his mouth was open. Music and booze. Marshall.
Did you have a favorite boat? If so, why was it your favorite one?
My favorite boat was I lived on a boat called a Shalangan. It was two 250 Cummins and 10-inch Hamilton jets, and it's built specifically for herring in California, and held 25 ton, and we filled it up a few times. So, but after herring price went down and El Nino devastated herring, they got smaller and it wasn't feasible. So it just really didn't fit up here. But it was awesome filling that boat up. And right now, my seiner's probably my favorite. There you go.
Talk about the changes in the fish population and what's no longer here. Do you see any difference in the water? So since you're on the water all the time, did you see the water, the gradual degradation of the water?
Yeah, is that again?
Was there changes in the water that you've seen with the fish population?
It just mainly global warming and red tide for shellfish. We never, I don't know if any Indian that ever got sick from red tide, but they closed the beaches all the time because of it. And the main problem was fecal chloroform coming down the river for clams. But I think there's part of the problem was us targeting herring, and that's the basis of the food chain. Chinook and coho feed off it, and that was probably a mistake to fish winter herring, and we did. And there's other things like the eelgrass on Cherry Point. I think Arco dumps a lot of 5,000 gallons a day, warm water, and I think that's what killed the eelgrass. So everything goes back to the basis of the food chain, and I'm not sure what happens to the algae that the other fish feed off them, but I think sooner or later they'll find out, but they really don't know what happens to the salmon out in the ocean. You know, so everything, killer whales are starving. So there's a lot of problems. I did, we were fishing up Point Roberts one time, gillnetting, and killer whales were going through, and I was leaning on my boat like this, and this, the matriarch come up, and my net was right like this, and she come up right here, looked at me like that, and then went back down, and I was like, holy shit, I could have bit my head off, you know. But eye was that big, what awesome. And then she went under my net and started popping her tail, you know, like recognizing that, saying hi or something or bye, you know.
Hmm.
Was you involved any with when that fish farm messed up out there in the islands?
No, I wasn't. But some of the guys that first got in it and caught a lot of that fish, they, it was big bucks for them. They got paid for recovering them. And I think we all knew it was just a matter of time that that those fish farms would, a big storm or something would blow them up. And they, I think the long-term impact hasn't been recognized yet for a while because they're still out there. I don't know if they reproduce or not, but they did find one that did have eggs in it. and they did find one up the Skagit River.
I was wondering if you guys have any heroes that you guys consider heroes because their fishing history, like people that might have been involved in the fishings or anything like that.
Probably the biggest, he was the guy that was out there all the time, and that was Goog Kinley. He had a seiner, and he basically pioneered southeastern for seining, and they still do it today. And he had all the information. Any question that you had, he had to answer for because he did it all his life. And then probably my father-in-law and some of the older ones, you know, that fished around here all their life.
He's mine.
That was a question. That was a question.
And my mother. Heroes, fishing heroes.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you know, my dad's my hero and my mom. You know, and seeing everybody out there that, you know, is working every day on the, you know, crabbing and fishing, it's a lot of work, and I understand that, you know, everybody's doing it to provide for their families.
I'd say the same. Probably my parents, my uncles, my aunties, the ones that carry on that legacy. Some of the female fishers, Ellie Kinley, and there's some actually here right now too. You know, some of the females that keep doing it. It's hard work, just to be up really early and then sometimes be up days at a time.
People here to recognize that we have these heroes that we live with today. And I thank you. I thank you for keeping these stories.
One of the things I've been, all the stories of down the river, the fishing villages, all the drifts that he talked about, you know, is every one of them has a story, and maybe Bill James is putting some of it together, but there was, you know, Big Drag, Lovers, and Sawdust, and Fish Point. And it's one time, my father-in-law Jack was fishing down there with a bunch of young guys, Johnny Green and Fuzzy and all them guys. And they were, you know, you'd sit there and wait for you to drift and build a fire and talk. And they started talking about Sasquatch, you know, somebody'd seen Sasquatch fish footprints, you know, and then pretty soon they heard something coming through the bushes, and they got all scared, and they all went ripping up river at 40 miles an hour. And my father-in-law, he just kind of laughed. He pointed his flashlight in there, and what that noise was, and it was a beaver pulling a piece of wood out. So he got to fish there all night by himself. And the crazy story, like Clyde and Ditzy poured gas on Buster's boots while he was sleeping and lit him up. He went dancing in the river. One time, you know, there's one time they were smoking grass and blowing smoke up Hotshot's nose there, and he woke up all high, and he didn't know what was going on. There's 100 stories that that never been cataloged or been told. You know, just get young guys together and they do crazy things. I'd like to ask the young folks here what y'all gonna be. Y'all know what you want to be yet? That guy there, what you want to be, boy? There you go.
I'll be a cultural preservation officer, protect property, sites, things of this nature?
Okay, good.
It's really hard because my first goal was to get into tribal business because but ever since I've started coming here and learning, like rediscovering really like what it means to be a NWIC and what it means to be a Salish person, it's hard for me not to switch it to like our bachelor's Native Leadership program or even what's that called, Native Environmental Science, because it's this that you guys are sharing, like this knowledge, like that's very important to preserve this resource that we have very little of now. And it's hard for me not to switch that, and I want to so bad, and just coming here helps me, like, I think, make that decision a little bit easier of what I want to do. Thank you.
I think this is a good learning experience for you, and I'm proud that you guys are, you're our future and are a valuable resource. And I'm glad that Lummy's got to educate you in things you wanted to do, and some of the opportunity that wasn't available outside is here for you. But just know what you want to do and what you want to be, and hard work is the only, if nothing else, it's hard work, you know. If you get successful enough, you can be a part-time fisherman.
Like me.
It is really hard to look at the openings that we have now, the fish openings, 2 days, hours even, when what we were used to is growing up on the water and spending weeks at a time on the boat and not being able to go to shore too often. I remember going to Point Roberts and having to take a cold shower to get the fish scales out of my hair. We would get a couple quarters and put them in the shower, and it was cold, so it would be a really fast wash to get the fish scales out and to go back on the boat. I think one of my favorite memories is sleeping in the Jason R in the bow with Star. We would sleep right in the bow and get basically rocked to sleep by the waves and the noise. And it's just not like that anymore. And for me, it's sad because I loved growing up like that. That was our way of life. And the children don't know that anymore. And it's truly heartbreaking when there's always hours or days on the water and that's it. Because there's a lot of teachings out there, and it's truly is the way of life for all of our people. And any efforts that help with that won't go unnoticed. Every little thing can help, like my dad talked about logging and the dredging of the river, and how all of that will maybe slowly bring it back.
Danielle, what did you tell me you were going to do? Would you want to do?
Language.
Teacher. Yay.
Did any of you meet any fishermen like out of Prince of Wales? I heard y'all went to Alaska quite a few times growing up.
You ever meet any fishermen in the Prince of Wales?
Hmm?
When we went to Alaska, did you meet anyone from the Prince of Wales?
No. We went to Alaska, there was Italians, Yugoslavians, and Russians. The Russians have their own culture up there.
This is Trina's son.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Relative.
Cousin.
Auntie Helen.
Cousin, huh? A lot of our trips up there, we lived in a camp, and we met people on the water, and a lot of times it was under stress because they hollering at you, you know. But I've never met anybody from there.
Do you have any stories about Donald Lewis?
Donald?
Yeah.
Yeah, your grandpa, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We went up to Good News Bay and fished herring, and they brought us up there because it was the first year they fished there, so they brought us up there because we was experienced. So we went right in, and they were camped out on the beach, and we set our nets, and we weren't ready. We planned on being there for a week, getting brailers and drums hooked up, and the fish come in right as soon as we pulled in, just perfect timing, and we set nets, and that was the night we had 40 ton overnight, shoveled it by hand, and cargo nets, and then we stayed in a tent for on the beach for 10 days, and we run out of food and water. And since him and his brother, the youngest, they stayed in the middle of the tent where it was warm, and us younger guys were on the edges and cold and wet all night. So,
What were the name of his boats?
he had Renzi, a seiner, Lummy Maid, the gill netter. Lummy Maid was his gill netter.
Oh yeah.
The name of his boat?
Renzi, and Callie Mae, yeah. That was named after the oldest daughter, right? Mm-hmm. So, and he was, we went herring fishing in Crescent City at first, and there wasn't no fish, so we applied for San Francisco, and because we fished in Crescent City, the permits were under Nick and we got drawn, and Nick and Mann were the only two that got drawn out of I and Jack and Donald and Bob Davis. So we fished with them under their permit, and the next year the Fish and Game found out they were underage, so they couldn't fish there anymore. But we got the experience to apply for permits there, and that was in '74. So, and then Donald lost his permit because he found a piece of derelict net, and he put it on the house, and the Fish and Game gave him a ticket, and he lost his permit over it, just because he tried to do a good thing. And he could have applied and probably won that, but you know, basically him and Donald and Jack were the ones that, like I said, they pioneered. They started the whole West Coast roe herring fisheries out here in front of Arco, and they got so much fish that they lost the whole net. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How have the pooling runs changed in your time on the river?
What's that?
How have the hooligan runs changed since your time on the river?
Back when I was growing up, you could go up and fill up a boat if you wanted to, and there was some guys that did it and tried to sell them. But right now, I think I haven't. Sometimes it's hard to get a bucket, you know, let alone a tote full. And I don't know if there's guys that still do it, but it's not as prevalent as it used to be, where everybody ate it and looked forward to eating it. Some of my sisters don't even like it. But it's fun to do. You ever done it?
No, I have not.
Go down there and knock one of them guys over and steal their dip net and try it for a night.
I have a question. My dad was one of the first people to start the shrimp fishery here, and I'd like to hear about how we started it and why. Fish, or shrimp.
Shrimp, back when we started shrimp, we were making always, my mindset is always look for something because nothing lasts forever. That's what my grandma said. My grandmother said nothing good lasts forever. So way back when we were making a lot of money on salmon and crab, and I heard about these guys in the harbor talking about these big lobster out there. And I think there's no lobster out here, so I talked to a few guys. There was 9 permits out there fishing shrimp. So I bought 100 shrimp pots, and I went up and told the tribe, hey, I'm going to go out and try some shrimp. And he says, well, no, that hasn't been adjudicated in court yet. And I said, okay, well, I'll go out and put my NWIC buoys on it anyway. And he says, oh, wait a minute, now we'll give you a special permit. So I started, the first year we just found the area. And then the next year I started fishing it really hard, and the guys that fished it, they had no competition. They'd go out at 9 o'clock and be back in by 4. So I fished it like herring and anything else. I went from daylight till dark, and every other tide's a big tide, so I fished the good tides. And third year, I had 14,000 pounds at $8, $9 an hour. So I was at a time when we were catching a lot of fish too, you know. So after fish disappeared, we depend on that a bit now. But same thing, there's 7 tribes doing it. So and on the same quota. So I think we get 2 5-hour openings and we're done with it. Whereas back then I fished all summer. But that's kind of my mindset, just keep looking for something different to do and other opportunities. There's a sports fishing for shrimp too, so jump on somebody's boat and go catch some sports shrimp.
A couple years back, the starfish were dying off and they're coming back now. Did you see any difference in what you were fishing for then and in anything like population or what was available or what was not?
The starfish, we didn't like the starfish because once they'd get in a crab pot, the crab wouldn't go in. But the one starfish, brittle star crab, eat those. So mainly they were just a nuisance, but it's disturbing that it could happen that bad that they can get a virus and all die off. And they're coming back now. They're smaller ones, but I heard stories that the whole Pacific Ocean died off. But they must have survived somewhere. And that's a sign of the troubling times of the ocean, that if something could die off and in that a mass extinction almost, you know. I think it could happen to anything, you know. And the biggest, scariest thing to me is areas of depleted oxygen, and that's out on the coast. We haven't seen that in here yet. But I don't know what the answer is. You know, there's always stories of whales beaching themselves and birds dying, you know, and it's disturbing, you know. Hopefully one of these college students would focus on it and have the answers.